microbes in the process, killing for any remaining bacteria that were resistant to the drug, enabling them to multiply. And contrary to popular perception, that problem can arise even when antibiotics are used appropriately, Temples Gallagher said. Any use leads to resistance, he said. If you're using amoxicillin to treat someone's strep infection, the bacteria in your gut do not cure. It can still lead to a resistant infection elsewhere in the body. Not included in the study is another cause for concern, the overuse of antibiotics in livestock. In the U.S., the drugs are given to farm animals in far greater numbers than to human patients. While the drugs are needed to treat sick animals, some farmers have traditionally used them as a preventative measure or even just to promote growth. Public health experts warn that such overuse may lead to the development of drug-resistant bacteria, which in turn can spread from farm animals to humans. Rick?
National Geographic admits for decades our coverage was racist. Months ago, when National Geographic set out to make race the sole focus of its April 2018 issue, it decided to engage in some soul-searching. For much of its 130-year history, the magazine depicted people of color in crude stereotypes. Its archives are loaded with pictures of brown-skinned natives gazing in apparent awe at Western technology, articles referring to tribal peoples as savages, and of course many, many photos of the bare-breasted Pacific Island women striking vaguely seductive poses. So in preparation for its examination of race, National Geographic Editor-in-Chief Susan Goldberg tapped John Edwin Mason, a University of Virginia professor specializing in the history of photography and the history of Africa, to dive into the magazine's past. She discussed his findings in an editor's note. What Mason found, in short, was that until the 1970s, National Geographic all but ignored people of color who lived in the United States, rarely acknowledging them beyond the laborers or domestic workers, Goldberg wrote. Meanwhile, it pictured natives elsewhere as exotic, famously and frequently unclothed, happy hunters, noble savages, every type of cliche. The title of Goldberg's piece put it more bluntly: for decades our coverage was racist. To rise above our past, we must acknowledge it. It was an extraordinary concession from the magazine, renowned for its photography and its coverage of science, history, anthropology, and the environment. National Geography has also faced criticism over the years for reporting on the world through a narrow white Western lens. Brianna Edwards of the African-American focused news and culture site The Root called the move the first step to righting a long overlooked and perhaps even taken for granted wrong. Bluntly acknowledging its own past in this way is indeed powerful, but it is not necessarily something I think that we should applaud as much as we should expect, Edwards wrote, especially at this time in our lives when race and discussions of racism and even general cultural insensitivity can be volatile, tense, and even deadly. Others were more critical, including Vox's Kynaz Amaria, who tweeted that the magazine's colonial visual legacy had in effect trained non-white, non-Western people to allow themselves to be exploited and otherized. Goldberg noted that she is the first woman and the first Jewish person to serve as editor-in-chief, so she's sensitive, she said, to the magazine's legacy of discrimination. She highlighted several examples of racist content the magazine published over the course of several decades. In one instance, National Geographic in 1916 ran an article that called Aboriginal Australians blackfellows, who rank lowest in intelligence of all human beings. A 1941 piece used a racial slur to describe Black California cotton workers, and a 1962 photo depicted a white photographer showing his camera to a group of Timorese men. The native person fascinated by Western technology was a recurring theme, Mason said. It really creates this us and them dichotomy between the civilized and the uncivilized. Goldberg said the magazine has improved in recent years, in part by putting cameras in the hands of the people who are often on the other side of the lens. In one project in 2015, for example, the magazine gave cameras to young Haitians and asked them to shoot pictures of their world. Goldberg said she wants to continue on that course by hiring more diverse journalists at the magazine. The coverage wasn't right before because it was told from an elite white American point of view. And I think it speaks to exactly why we need a diversity of storytellers, Goldberg said. Paul?
This article out of Washington, in ordering the largest mass expulsion of Russian diplomats ever, the U.S. and its allies have upped the ante in an East-West spy game that dates to the Cold War and casts light on an unspoken but widespread practice in the cloak and dagger world, sending operatives abroad under diplomatic cover. The tallies offered Monday by senior U.S. officials were striking. Far more than 100 Russian spies are on American soil masquerading as diplomats. The U.S. said it was kicking out 60. So even after they're gone, at least 40 will ostensibly remain, free to roam Washington and other major U.S. cities under the official umbrella of their nation's foreign ministry. So if they're truly spies and the United States knows it, why not expel them all? The answer, experts say, is that espionage, while murky, potentially distasteful, and often illegal, is an accepted international practice. All countries spy, and most, if not all, send spies overseas disguised as diplomats, including the U.S. Embassies and diplomatic missions for hundreds and hundreds of years have been used to spy in adversary lands, said retired Army Colonel Christopher Costa, executive director of the International Spy Museum in Washington. He said even when spies are discovered, it's often more fruitful to follow them discreetly than to expel them. The cat and mouse game of counterespionage is about understanding who that officer is in touch with. There's another reason for the U.S. not to go overboard in kicking out known Russian intelligence operatives posted to diplomatic missions. America is in the game too. When one country expels another country's representatives, it's both expected and accepted that the country using punish takes reciprocal steps. In 2016, when the Obama administration expelled 35 Russian diplomats, Moscow quickly booted 35 Americans. A similar tit-for-tat played out this month after Britain ousted 23 Russians and the Kremlin ordered out 23 Brits. That means that the more Russian spies the U.S. kicks out, the more of its own spies are likely to be forced out of Russia, Costa said. When one country posts spies to its embassy in a friendly nation, it usually declares them, telling the host country who they are. You would think that then they wouldn't be spies. Those spies, while publicly still claiming to be diplomats, then act as liaisons to the host country's intelligence services, creating a useful back channel. With countries that have hostile relations, such as the U.S. and Russia, the governments don't tell each other who the spies are. So a high-stakes game of spy hunting inevitably takes place. Every new Russian diplomat assigned to a mission in the United States, such as the embassy in Washington or the Seattle consulate that the U.S. has ordered closed, is assessed by the FBI and other U.S. counterintelligence officials, said John Schindler, a former counterintelligence official and National Security Agency analyst. Some can be quickly identified, based on where they've worked previously and in what position. Historical information that's far easier to track in the modern age of Google and Alexa Nexus. Certain positions in embassies are notorious for being filled by spies, such as security officials, political officers, and communication specialists, who often are secretly engaged in technical collection of what's known as signal intelligence, intercepting phone calls or electronic communications. If you still can't tell, you wait until they get to this country and you watch what they do, Schindler said. Are they having clandestine meetings with people? Are they using techniques to avoid surveillance? The U.S. has long claimed that, as a rule, it does not use certain jobs as cover for intelligence operatives, such as U.S. Agency for International Development Workers and Peace Corps volunteers. The theory is that any perception that those staffers might be spies would create serious safety risks for actual humanitarian workers. Said Schindler, there are gentlemen's rules about this, and there have been for a long time. During the Cold War, capitals around the globe developed reputations for being awash with thousands of agents working for rival intelligence agencies under diplomatic cover. From Asia to the Middle East and throughout Europe, and the East-West tug-of-war played out between spies in cities such as Athens, Bangkok, Beirut, Belgrade, Berlin, Cairo, Tehran, and Vienna, often in open sight before unsuspecting passers-by. After the fall of the Soviet Union, such activity subsided, but it never altogether disappeared. Now it's back with a vengeance. Rick?
Moving on to local and legislative news, an article that's near and dear to all Omahans' heart. Getting our fill of potholes. Potholes along West Maple Road, Mike Bischoff said Tuesday, are deeper, there's more of them, and it's really widespread. Bischoff, general manager of Dillon Brothers Harley Davidson on West Maple near 175th Street, said the road is the worst I've ever seen it. Omahans seem to agree with him. The city's street crews have tackled a record number of pothole work orders this month, and March still has a few days left. The city has filled 1,208 work orders, smashing the previous mark of 840 set in February 2016, Austin Rouser, Omaha Street Maintenance Engineer, said Tuesday. A work order can equal one pothole or 101, depending on the job, Rouser said, so individual pothole numbers are not totaled. Rouser said the city averages about 570 work orders in March. The 1,208 work orders this month came on 3,823 requests to fill potholes made through the mayor's hotline, the city's website, and the city's app. The cold and moisture are driving the work orders, Rouser said. Generally, city trucks treat Omaha streets with brine or rock salt 10 to 15 times a winter, he said. This season, Rouser said trucks have been out with brine or salt 26 times. The salt leaves Omaha roadways safer, but also melts snow and ice, and the moisture then seeps into cracks and small holes. This, of course, creates bigger cracks and bigger holes when the moisture freezes and expands. Bischoff said the potholes have kept his motorcycle customers off Omaha streets. There's a lot of people that said they haven't got their bikes out yet because the city's in such bad shape. The pothole situation isn't terrible everywhere, Jeff Thompson, Public Works Director, City Engineer for Papillion, said this year isn't the worst one for potholes in his city. It may seem as though the problem is getting worse, but I don't think it really is here. The city of Papillion gets one or two pothole complaints a week, Thompson said. I don't envy the street crew guys in Omaha at all. In Council Bluffs, Jeremy Knoll, the city's manager of streets and sewer, said it seems to be a little worse this year, but we go through it every year. Council Bluffs is getting a handful to a dozen calls per day about potholes, Knoll said. The Bluffs has 3 or 5 or 6 man crews working on potholes during the day, and one night crew, Knoll said. We have guys covering the whole 24-hour period, he said. If we aren't in snow mode, we're filling potholes. Rouser said 25 crews, averaging 3 to 4 workers each, are on pothole duty in Omaha 6 days a week. Omaha's peak month for filling potholes is April. The goal, Rouser said, is to have all streets repaired by the College World Series in mid-June. Tuesday, crews began a 4-day chore of filling holes on West Maple Road from 120th Street West to 216th Street. That's a massive pothole project out there, Rouser said of the West Maple effort. Bischoff from the Harley dealership said he drove back to his business from downtown Omaha on Tuesday afternoon and passed 3 city crews patching potholes. They're making hay, he said. Rouser said the work wears on the crews who he said are working 70-hour weeks. It's definitely taking a toll on the guys, he said. Rouser urged motorists to slow down when approaching road crews and give workers plenty of room to maneuver. Paul?
Saw one of the crews out this morning on 108th and Maple, and so they're definitely out there.
They're all over.
Lincoln Public School officials want to raise the price of school lunch by 10 cents next year. Federal law requires that schools review their lunch price annually to make sure they comply with federal equity rules designed to ensure federal subsidies for the free and reduced lunch program aren't used to help support the cost of paid lunches. The federal government does provide some subsidies for paid lunches as well, but a much smaller amount. LPS serves about 27,000 lunches a day. About 45% of those are paid lunches. Under the federal rules, schools whose lunch prices don't comply with the equity rule must increase their lunch prices, but not by more than 10 cents. The last time LPS raised lunch prices was 2014-15. Proposed prices for LPS lunches during the next school year: elementary school, $2.45, middle school, $2.65, high school, $2.80. The family of a student who eats lunch at school daily will spend more than $416 on meals in a school year. The board is expected to approve the increases April 24th. Rick?
Sarpy seeks to speed up process on traffic lights. State says not so fast. Sarpy County wants the authority to install lights at intersections on Nebraska 370, but that's not possible, says the Nebraska Department of Transportation, which controls the highway. That's okay, said County Commissioner Jim Warren. I think it will at least open up discussion. Citing public safety concerns as the county grows, the Sarpy County Board approved a resolution Tuesday afternoon requesting that the state let Sarpy make decisions on the highway's traffic lights. The county wants to speed up the process of installing lights at intersections, potentially preventing accidents. This isn't a control issue, Warren said. It's a public safety issue. The Department of Transportation said Tuesday afternoon that the county's desire is not legal. They can't do what they want to do, said Tim Weander, the Transportation Department's District 2 engineer. The only legal way for the county to control intersections, he said, is for the county to request the state relinquish the highway and for the county to take over ownership. The highway stretches about 16 miles east to west from U.S. Highway 75 in Bellevue to Nebraska Highway 31 in Gretna. We're certainly willing to listen and discuss this option, Weander said in an email sent to Commissioner Don Kelly, obtained by the World Herald. Kelly and Warren said during the meeting that they were open to the possibility that would require trade-offs with the state, they said, as taking on the highway would be costly. The county board's move comes 11 days after an Omaha man died in a crash on Highway 370 at 186th Street. Kelly said the resolution is not a direct response to that crash. The highway has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour and has at least 4 lanes across in most places. It's a busy highway that cuts through a rapidly developing area that includes schools and a large number of retirees. In 2016, for instance, Highway 370 had an annual weekday traffic average of about 32,000 cars at 60th Street, according to the Metropolitan Area Planning Agency. Weander said the state is installing a traffic signal at 150th Street this summer. The department is also beginning the design of traffic signals at 174th Street and 114th Street. Still, there are a number of other problematic intersections, Kelly said, and the state's process for getting traffic signals installed is long. Gretna Public School Superintendent Kevin Riley said the district has wanted a light at 186th and 192nd Street for a while. The district recently built a new elementary school and a middle school north of the highway, and in the future, a new high school will be built there too. Riley said he understands the guidelines and traffic counts that must be met before the state can install traffic signals, but there needs to be flexibility, he said. The county's next step will be to draft an interlocal agreement to send to the state. Warren said although the state doesn't seem poised to approve the request, the main goal of the resolution was to start a conversation. Well,
if a gunman ever breaches the walls of one of Lincoln's public high schools, police will be able to monitor what's happening in real time from the video cameras installed there. The city and Lincoln Public Schools this week approved a memorandum of understanding that gives Lincoln Police access to live video feeds in such circumstances, a formal agreement that comes on the heels of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, and at the urging of concerned citizens. It has been an ongoing discussion of at least during my tenure and possibly a little prior to that, said Police Chief Jeff Bleitmeister. We're constantly working with LPS to try to balance our needs in a critical incident with the privacy of students. The Florida shooting February 14th that killed 17 people galvanized survivors to advocate for stricter gun laws, prompted nationwide school walkouts, and drew thousands to marches in Washington and across the country on Saturday, including in Lincoln. It also led a group of Lincoln parents to organize an appeal to school officials for changes to a variety of school security procedures, including to question why police didn't already have such access to the video feeds. The agreement allows for a secure pathway that will allow police to see the video feeds if such an event occurs, but the agreement is designed to minimize intrusion into student activity or school events. In other words, it will only be used in emergencies such as an active shooter or a few other instances, and will allow LPS to audit the access. Police must document for the district in writing when and why they use the video feed. It will only be accessed in the most extreme circumstances, hopefully none of which will occur, Bleitmeister said. Police could also access the video feed during law enforcement training or if there's a burglary at the school when no students are present, to help police locate suspects or for the safety of officers when they enter the building, he said. Now, when police want to see video as part of an investigation of a crime, such as an assault, they get a subpoena, and Bleitmeister said that won't change. In 2014, LPS approved putting video cameras in high schools and on buses. At the time, the board considered privacy issues of students choosing not to put them in classrooms or places with expectations of privacy, such as bathrooms. The policy also says the videos are considered student records that could be subject to federal privacy laws. Cameras are in all 6 high schools now, and Operations Director Scott Weiskamp estimated there are about 50 cameras inside and outside each school. A few other schools have them for specific reasons, to monitor visitors after they check in and head to an office not located near the entrance, for instance. The Lincoln Board of Education approved the deal, previously approved by Mayor Chris Beitler on Tuesday night. Rick?
Emotions run high at hearing on liquor sales in Gifford Park. Voices raised, fingers pointed, and tears fell during an emotional hearing on whether to expand the liquor license for a Gifford Park convenience store. Daniel Dessy of Danny's Corner Store at 33rd and California Street said he's at a competitive disadvantage to other area stores that can sell more varieties of alcohol. He asked the Omaha City Council on Tuesday to allow him to upgrade his beer-only liquor license to one that allows him to sell liquor too. But some neighbors opposed the change, saying the introduction of more booze would set back efforts to revitalize the Gifford Park neighborhood. And they pointed out that the location, particularly when it was the K&J grocery store, has had problems. Resident Gary Sullivan brought photos from a recent visit to the store that showed coolers full of beer, including single bottles and cans of beer on ice and junk food. How is this any different than White Clay, Nebraska, pushing alcohol sales on low-income people, he said. Attorney Chris Estwick, Dessy's attorney, said that Dessy has turned the store around and that there have been no liquor license violations under him. Dessy, who was in tears through some of the hearing, described the sale of single beers as a one-time deal for March Madness. There are a lot of neighborhood ills there that are being unfairly attributed to my client, as Estwick said. Council Vice President Chris Jerem told Desi that it was incomprehensible that he'd tell the council he needed to upgrade his license to survive, when the business was operated since 2012 with a beer-only license. Jerem proposed approving the upgraded license, but with one exception: no sales of single beers or sales of single small liquor bottles, commonly known as airplane shooters. Desi agreed, and the council approved the proposal 7-0. The council's action is a recommendation to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, which has ultimate authority. Paul?
This article out of Scotts Bluff. Alice Laura takes out fresh red meat and begins cutting it up on the counter at the kitchen at Riverside Discovery Center. Each chunk is placed in a different container for one of the cats at the zoo. Kim Prody, Laura's sister, is at another station in the kitchen cutting raw vegetables and fruit for several animals. Most of the Laura family began working at the zoo as volunteers. In 2013, Laura was looking for something to get her out of the house. She volunteered as a docent, which she still does. She helped her husband, Danny Laura, with mowing, cleaning sidewalks, and raking leaves. I volunteered for 1.5 years, Alice said. Eventually, they needed another person for maintenance and asked if I would like to come on. After coming on staff, Alice learned she really enjoyed making the diets for the animals. Each portion of food is weighed every day to make sure the animals get optimum meals. Produce is delivered from Panhandle Co-op's Main Street Market. Laura can eyeball the sizes of the produce so they're manageable for the animal that gets it. The reptiles receive smaller chunks, while Tyke, the raccoon, and the squirrel monkeys get pieces somewhat in between. Sarah and Scooter, the chimpanzee, get a whole pear and banana, Laura said. The bears get theirs cut in half so it lasts a little longer. Creating meals for the animals is a relaxing task for Laura. It's time she gets to spend alone just working. She recently learned how to dress a goose, I guess that's a little different from a moose, and take off its feet. If there are enough goose, the swift foxes, black leopard, bobcat, and Eurasian lynx will all get a share. I really like ordering the crickets, and most of the time I place the order for rats, Laura said. Twin City Pack in Gearing donates bones and hearts for the cats. Those kind of donations are a big help, and we really appreciate it, Laura said. Deer and geese meat are donated by local hunters who field dress the animals before delivering them to the zoo. When we don't have bones from Twin City, we will give the animal a deer leg, Laura said. The raptors at the zoo receive rats on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Each raptor has its own schedule. There's a calendar on the wall that lists which animal eats what, which days they are fed, and which day they fast. Laura insists the rats are not difficult to deal with. They're just smelly. During the summer, donations of produce arrive as local gardeners realize they've planted too much food. Anytime anyone wants to donate, we can accept it, Laura said. We accept deer, geese, duck, and the livers and hearts of field animals from hunting. Laura makes the diets on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Friday, she makes 3 days worth of food. Tuesdays and Saturdays are catch-up days to do other things, Laura said. Those other things include everything from mowing to cleaning bathrooms to maintenance and repairs. Laura is also in charge of making sure community service workers have something to do when they arrive. Although her job may seem repetitious, Laura never does the same thing at the same time every day. She helps set up tables and chairs for events and designs and sets up for big events such as Spooktacular and Haunted Museum, which can shift her daily schedule. Every day is a different thing, Laura said. There are always lots of different obstacles. Rick?
Some foresee compromise on Title X, but doubts growth from Lincoln. State senators are continuing negotiations to end an impasse over Title X funding in the Nebraska legislature, prompting varying levels of optimism and some skepticism from lawmakers as the number of days left in the 60-day session dwindles to single digits. Senators are still trying to reach a compromise on the main budget bill. The final day of the session is scheduled to be April 18th. The stalemate centers on language in the budget bill proposed by Governor Pete Ricketts. The language would prohibit entities that perform, counsel, or refer for abortions from receiving federal family planning funding known as Title X. Senator Dan Watermeyer of Syracuse, who has been part of the negotiations and supports Ricketts' language, said Tuesday that he thinks lawmakers are close to reaching a compromise. Other senators don't share that hope. A legislative special session looking more and more likely. Also, Governor Pete Ricketts can eliminate family planning and birth control for 28,000 low-income Nebraska women, Senator Evan Moorfield of Lincoln said in posts on Facebook and Twitter. A spokesman for Ricketts said the governor does not believe a special session will be necessary and urged Moorfield to do the right thing and vote to move the mainline budget forward. Special sessions typically are called by the governor, though lawmakers can do so with 33 votes. Watermeyer said he's not willing to give up on the good things inside the main budget bill, like additional child welfare dollars and protecting the University of Nebraska budget from further cuts to potentially starting over from scratch in a special session. All the good things we've done could be off the table, he said. Senator Anna Weishart of Lincoln said, and Senator Tara Howard of Omaha said Monday that they have been working with other senators to try to find a compromise on the Title X language. Talks were ongoing Tuesday. Weishart said the Title X language in the budget bill has significant ramifications for the health and safety of women. In his weekly column, Ricketts said the language is critical because 2 state audits have found serious financial irregularities in the use of Title X funds. The governor said his proposal ensures that taxpayer dollars will not subsidize abortions directly or indirectly. He said not passing the budget adjustment puts vital state services like child welfare funding at risk. Some senators who oppose this pro-life budget language are recklessly holding up the entire state budget, Ricketts said. By filibustering the mainline budget, they are putting critical budget priorities at risk. Opponents of Ricketts' plan argued that the Title X language proposed by the governor could exclude all or at least most of the current Title X agencies from qualifying for funding. In a letter to the World Herald, Weishart, Howard, and Senator Paul Schumacher of Columbus said they will not make a choice between child welfare and women's health care funding because the two are linked. A healthy mom is a healthy family, the senator said. With that in mind, we have opposed efforts by the governor and some of our colleagues to make standalone women's health clinics ineligible for Title X federal grant funding for vital preventative health services. In a letter to senators on Tuesday, Ricketts said all clinics will continue to be eligible to receive Title X funds as long as they do not provide abortion services or refer for or provide directive counseling for abortions. Last week, 2 votes on 2 different days to cease debate on the main budget bill failed. Last Wednesday's vote failed by 3 votes. Friday's vote failed by 2 votes. Senator John Stinner of Gering, chairman of the Budget Crafting Appropriations Committee, said he has not been apprised of progress on the negotiations, but he's not ready to give up. I'm hopeful that we can come to some kind of reasonable compromise, he said. Paul.
Well, it's 10:44, and we're going to switch over to the death notices. I will be reading from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Antholz. Roberta Antholz, A-N-T-H-O-L-Z, age 67 of Lincoln. Funeral service will be at 10:30 a.m. Thursday, March 29th at Southwood Lutheran Church. Roper and Sons South Lincoln Chapel is handling arrangements. Memorials can be made to the Southwood Lutheran Church, American Cancer Society, and Hearts United for Animals. Archer. James Archer, age 88. Celebration of life will be conducted from 1:30 to 4:30, March 30th at the Wilderness Ridge Lodge. Memorials to the Tabitha or Cornhusker Kiwanis. Becker. Judith Becker, age 79, of Lincoln. Funeral services will be conducted at 11 a.m. Friday, March 30th at the Federated Church in Sutton. In lieu of flowers, memorial contributions may be directed to the family to be designated later. Sutton Memorial is handling arrangements. Dalton. Ruby Dalton, age 87, of Lincoln. Funeral service will be held at 2 p.m. Thursday, March 29th at Boothurst Mazer Love Funeral Home in Lincoln. A memorial fund is being established. Good Mortuary in Nebraska City is handling the arrangements. Mayo. Z.B. Mayo, Jr., age 74, of Lincoln. A celebration of ZB's life will be at 10:30 a.m. Thursday, March 29th at Boothurst Mazer and Love Funeral Home. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Food Bank of Lincoln Backpack Program. Remington. Connie Remington, age 69. There will be a celebration of life from 6 to 7:30 on Thursday, March 29th at the Metcalf Funeral Home on 27th Street in Lincoln. Private family burial and cremation. Vicar. Roland Vicar, age 87, of Lincoln. Funeral services will be held at 2:30 p.m. Friday, March 30th at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Lincoln. Memorials may be given to Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. Roper and Sons Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. And finally, these individuals who the names were just listed and there was no other information available. Bowling, Willis Bowling, age 74, of Tecumseh. Pettit, Joshua Pettit, age 38. And lastly, Wilkinson, Marjorie Wilkinson, age 91, of Fairbury. Rick?
From the Omaha World Herald. Arkfeld, Janet Frenzer Arkfeld, age 76. Memorial services will be held later. Baines, John Albert Johnny Baines, age 94. Memorial service Tuesday, April 17th, 11:30 at Avery Presbyterian Church in Bellevue. Memorials to Avery Presbyterian Church and Shriners Hospitals. Beverly, Michael Beverly, age 61. A visitation Thursday to 6 to 8 p.m. Services Friday, 10 a.m. both at Good Shepherd Funeral Home. Birch, Lois M. Birch, 93. Memorial service on Friday, March 30th at 10 a.m. at Countryside Community Church. In lieu of flowers, the family suggests memorials to the Alzheimer's Association or the Salvation Army. P.P. Hoff and Roy Cutler is handling the services. Bohack, Leonard Bohack, age 21. Celebration of Life 4 to 7, Friday, March 30th at Jimmy Dean's Lounge in Niobrara, Nebraska. Brock House Funeral Home is handling the services. Bird, Willie Bird, funeral age 83. Funeral services will be held 11 a.m. Friday, March 30th, with viewing beginning at 9:30 a.m., all at the Forest Lawn Funeral Home. Dees, Frank Gilbert Dees Jr., age 54, and no viewing and no services. Kramer Funeral Home is handling the remains. Dirks, Thomas M. Dirks, age 66. Visitation Thursday, 4 to 8 p.m., with family receiving friends from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Elkhorn Funeral Home, Reichmuth Funeral Home. Funeral Friday, 10:30 a.m. at St. John's Lutheran Church in Bennington. Interment at Prairie View Cemetery. Memorials to the cemetery of your team foundation. Ferguson, Jane A. Ferguson, age 59. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be directed to the American Cancer Society. Private family services will be held with Pastor Hennessy Funeral Home in Missouri Valley is handling the services. Freeds, Warren Lee Freeds, age 83. Michaela Funeral Home in Westlaco, Texas is handling the services. Vanessa Gregory, age 62. Services were held on March 23rd at Roeder Mortuary, the Ames Chapel. Hammerstrom, Betty Jane Hammerstrom, age 91. Celebration of Betty's life, Friday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Visitation 1 hour prior to the service, all at Raymond Mortuary Chapel. Interment, Forest Lawn. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the Acera Care Hospice. Hertzler, Jared J. Hertzler, MD. He was a veteran. A complete notice with service information will be issued later. Evie Hopp and Dward Cutler is handling the services. Jamber, Jeanette Marie DeBorrell Jamber, age 92. Mass of Christian burial Tuesday, April 3 at St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Prague, Nebraska. Visitation Monday, April 2nd with the 7 p.m. rosary, all at the church. In lieu of flowers, memorials to St. Cyril and Methodius Catholic Church in Plassey, Nebraska, or Bishop Newman High School. Svoboda Funeral Home in Wahoo is handling the services. Johnson, Thomas D. T.J. Johnson, age 79. Services will be held at 2 p.m. Thursday, April 5th at Roper and Sons South Chapel in Lincoln. Casper, William C. Casper, age 88. Mass of Christian burial will be held Wednesday, March 28th, 10 a.m. at St. Bernadette Catholic Church. Interment at the Calvary Cemetery. Memorials to St. Bernadette Church or Nebraska Heart Association. Evie Hoff and Dward Cutler's handling the services. Kamichik, Leela D. Kamichik, age 62. A complete notice will be issued later. Kraft, Carlene R. Kraft, age 80. Funeral service will be held Thursday, March 29th at 11 a.m. at the Faith Westwood Methodist Church. Interment at the Evergreen Cemetery. Memorials to Faith Westwood Methodist Church or the Nebraska Humane Society. Evie Hoff and Dward Cutler is handling the services. Madison, Margaret L. Madison, age 66. Funeral services will be held Friday at 11 a.m. at the Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. Interment in the Forest Lawn Cemetery. Roeder Mortuary, the Ames Chapel is handling the services. Mason, Woody Mason, age 73. He was a veteran. Funeral services Saturday, March 31st at Palin Funeral Services in Lyons. Visitation Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. Memorials to the Dodge County React or the family for later designation. Muchmore, Susan M. Muchmore, age 70. Visitation Wednesday, 5 to 7 p.m. Memorial service 10 a.m. Thursday, March 29th. All at the Roeder Mortuary in Omaha. Memorials to the Kuntz Memorial Lutheran Church. Merchek, Dareen M. Merchek, age 89. Celebration of Dareen's life will be held Friday, March 30th at the Bethany Funeral Home. Interment at St. John Cemetery. Nielsen, Joanne Nielsen, age 64. Celebration of life held on March 30th from 5 to 8 p.m. in memory of Joanne. Funeral services will be held on Saturday, March 31st at 11 a.m. at the West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home. Piniarski, Francis J. Frank Piniarski, age 55. Celebration of Frank's life will be held Thursday, March 29th, 10 a.m. at the Bethany Funeral Home Chapel. Interment at St. John Cemetery. Riddell, Carolyn A. Riddell, age 74. Celebration of life Saturday, March 31st, 10 a.m. at the United Methodist Church in Tacoma. Memorial visitation Thursday, March 29th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The family receiving friends at the Palin funeral services. It will be in Tacoma. Burial at the Oak Creek Cemetery in Raymond, Nebraska. Russell, Peter Grant Russell, age 63. Family suggests a donation in Peter's name to your favorite charity. Ryan, Jeanette Louise Ryan, age 91. Graveside services and burial will be held at a later date in Memorial Park Cemetery. Memorial contributions may be made to the Alzheimer's Association. Cutler O'Neill Meyer Woodring is handling the services. Stanley, Pamela J. Stanley, age 69. Visitation Monday, April 2nd from 5 to 8 p.m. at Hoy Kilnowski Funeral Home. Memorials may be directed to the American Lung Association or the National Breast Cancer Foundation in Pamela's honor. Study. Jeanette M. Study, age 78. Celebration of Jeanette's life will be held Wednesday, March 28th at 11 a.m. with visitation 1 hour prior to the service, all at the Faith Westwood United Methodist Church. Interment in the Oak Hill Cemetery in Plattsmouth in lieu of flowers, memorials to the church or family. Sweeney, Dennis Michael Mike Sweeney, age 77. He was a veteran. Visitation Wednesday, March 28th at the West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home. Funeral service Thursday, March 29th at West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home. In lieu of flowers, memorials to AMVETS Carillon Fund Department of Nebraska. Walker, Layman Berman Walker, age 80. Funeral services will be held 10:30 a.m. Thursday, March 29th at Bellevue Memorial Chapel and Sherman and Jeffers Cemetery in Jeffers, Minnesota. Wilcoxon, John D. Wilcoxon, age 78. He was a veteran. Memorial service Saturday, March 31st at 11 a.m. at Kramer Funeral Home. Military honors provided by VFW Post. Luncheon following at 1:30 at the Veterans of Foreign Wars, 9501 South 25th Street in Bellevue. Winkler, Betty A. Winkler, age 83. Funeral will be held Friday, March 30th, 2 p.m. at the Good Mortuary in Nebraska City. Burial in Wyuka Cemetery, Nebraska City. Visitation with family 5:30 to 7:30 Thursday, March 29th at the mortuary. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the Alzheimer's Associations. Woods, Elizabeth J. Woods, age 73. Visitation Thursday, 1 p.m. till service time at the Roder Mortuary, Ames Chapel. Memorial service Thursday, 2 p.m. Rhett, Geneva Rhett, age 88. Funeral will be held Friday, March 30th at 10 a.m. at Holy Family Church with a luncheon to follow. Interment to follow the luncheon at Wyuka Cemetery in Nebraska City at approximately 1 p.m. Family will direct memorials. And finally, Yarwood, Myrna May Yarwood, age 85. The celebration of Myrna's life will be held at a later date. Condolences may be expressed to the family at www.vernonfh.com. Skillman, McDonald, and Vernon Funeral Home in Mechanicsburg, Ohio is handling the services. Listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
Thank you very much, Rick Miner. We'll return to our stars in just a couple of moments, but first I'm going to let you know that you're tuned to the Radio Talking Book Network in Omaha, Nebraska. We've been proudly serving our blind and visually impaired listeners for over 43 years. Radio Talking Book is brought to you with the cooperation of KROS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the facilities of NET Radio and Television. Well, folks, it's almost 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and do our senior lunch menus today. Here with them is Jay Nielsen.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, March 28th, and your Meals on Wheels menu today will be your Easter dinner for Easter coming up this weekend. Your menu is roast pork loin with gravy, roasted red potatoes, cauliflower au gratin, Vienna bread with margarine, creamsicle pudding, and 1% milk. So happy Easter to those of you enjoying your Meals on Wheels menu today.
Noon on Tuesday would be a good.
Thank you, Jane. You can hear the senior lunch menus every day, Monday through Friday, right here on Radio Talking Book. Now, before we return for the second hour of the newspapers, let's listen to this public service announcement once again. Here is Jane Nielsen.
Greetings. This is Jane Nielsen, Executive Director of Radio Talking Book Service, here with a special announcement about a public hearing coming up next week. Please plan to attend the public hearing on Wednesday, March 28th, 2018, conducted by the Planning Department regarding the 2018 Action Plan. The public hearing will begin at 7 p.m. and will be held in the handicap accessible
What have they
legislative chamber of the
done in
Omaha
regard to the
Douglas
DACA
Civic Center
kit?
at
nothing
1819
yet.
Farm Street in Omaha. Parking on an hourly
still,
basis is
still
available
fighting.
at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center parking facility west of the Civic Center. Entrance to the parking facility is on Harney Street between 19th and 20th. You may cross the
I
street
don't
at
think they're ever going to
19th
do
to get
anything.
to the Civic Center,
I don't
or
think
use the
Congress is ever
tunnel
going
on
to
the
do
A
anything
level
anymore.
of the parking garage. In the Civic Center, select the LC level to get to the Legislative Chamber.
Sure admired those kids
Entrance
from
to the
that one
Civic Center
school
from
in
the street is on
Florida.
Farnham Street, which is on the
how
north side.
articulate they are.
The purpose of this public
Things
hearing
like
is
that.
to present the 2018
Talking about that
action
or
plan.
talking about the
The
shooting?
action
Talking
plan
about the shooting.
contains
Yeah.
the
Talking
budget
about
for the
kids that
activities
have been
the city
protesting.
of Omaha will undertake
Apparently that
using its
school is the
annual
magnet for
allocation of funds from the U.S. Department
trauma,
of Housing and Urban Development.
debate
All
and
persons
other things. So these
requesting
kids
language
are very
interpreters,
poised kids.
including sign language
They've been through
interpreters,
this already.
will need to
Did they
provide
ever
a minimum
decide
72-hour
why he-
advance notice.
Not that I heard.
Requests for alternative formats, such as large
Yeah,
print for the visually impaired,
Difficult
also
going
require a
forward.
minimum 72
Yeah.
I mean, it's
hours
difficult
notice
enough.
given
Yeah,
in
it is.
advance. Please contact
son's a grade
Jim
school teacher.
Anderson at
In the
402
white suburban.
444
Oh,
5150 extension 2019 if arrangements need to be made for you. Your input is crucial to the content and outcomes associated with the consolidated plan. If you have questions concerning the public hearing, please call Jim
but
Anderson
he's not, he said
again
he'll
at
he won't pray again.
402
He's not gonna
444
pray again.
5150
Almost everybody that I know of that
extension
teachers or work that
2019.
they say
Jim
the same
Anderson
thing.
is the Community Development Manager for the Planning Department.
Thank you very much, Jane. Let's now return for the
If I was a
second
teacher,
hour
I'd be a
of
greater
live
risk
reading
of shooting myself.
I know.
Harold, once again,
Figured
welcome
Anders
to
so
the
clumsy,
microphone.
he'd probably
Our
shoot
duo,
2 or 3
fellow once
kids
again,
out of his
Paul
holster.
Murphy and Rick Miner.
Well, it's 11:02, so we're going to switch over to the editorial page. I will be reading from the Lincoln Journal-Star. This debate accelerated regarding the merits of increasing Nebraska's interstate speed limit to 80 miles per hour. The arguably more important provisions of the bill sat parked away from the spotlight. The measure required a state study to determine if Nebraska's interstate infrastructure could adequately handle 80 mile per hour interstate speeds, a key means of why the Journal-Star editorial board favored the original legislation. To secure the bill's advancement, however, an amendment axed its most buzzworthy and controversial piece. Even with that provision gone, though, another element we support lives on: improved transit on rural state highways. The compromise struck by senators preserves a new classification for these roads called the Super 2 highways. These will be differentiated from standard state highways by their intermediate passing lanes in both directions, which increase the ability of motorists to pass slow-moving vehicles. Few of these exist in Nebraska, with short stretches of Nebraska 92 between Wahoo and David City, and Nebraska 50 between Syracuse and Tecumseh, representing potential models to expand upon. But neighboring states, including Iowa, use passing lanes far more extensively on major non-interstate highways. Nebraska drivers depend on the state's network of highways to attend work and school. Those same routes move large numbers of agricultural implements, 18-wheelers, and other large trucks, vehicles that power the state's economy, but tend to travel far more slowly than a passenger car. Opening up major routes with these sporadic passing lanes would help provide the rest of Nebraska with the transportation advantages enjoyed by those with interstate access. Nebraska contains nearly 500 miles of interstate highways, but that pales in comparison to its roughly 10,000 miles of other highways. Of the 16 Nebraska cities with more than 10,000 residents, 6 have no direct interstate access to their counties. Only 5 of the 15 communities with populations between 5 and 10,000 sit along Interstate 80. The rest of the state, including the vast majority of its land area, must rely almost exclusively on two-lane highway for transit, travel, and commerce. This bill still streamlines the ability of local authorities and the state to increase the speed limit on a variety of state highways. These highways can vary in speed, seemingly without rhyme or reason to drivers, because state law currently requires a study to increase highway speeds from 60 to 65 miles per hour. As Nebraska Department of Transportation Director Kyle Chiswise said recently on the Journal Star's Fresh Pressed podcast, this helps promote more uniformity on speed limits. So Nebraska drivers may soon get their chance to speed up, just not on I-80. But the remainder of the bill offers significant upgrades to far more miles of highways in the state. Rick?
Well, I don't know. My experience is driving out in western Omaha or western Nebraska. If you're doing 65, you're going to get run over.
Yeah. Amen.
Mental health is a priority. This is an article by the opinion writers for the World Herald. A growing number of physicians in the Midlands are commendably putting an appropriate emphasis on the total health of young people, bringing in considerations of mental health in addition to physical health. Between 8% and 9% of Nebraskans experienced an episode of major depression during the 2009-2013, according to the latest figures. The number for Iowa increased from about 8% in 2010 to 10.4% in 2013. Depression can be a problem for young people regardless of race, income, or size of community. These emotional challenges, especially if undiagnosed, can weigh heavily on adolescents and their families. In worst-case situations, the problems lead to health, self-harm, and suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for those 15 to 19 years old in both Nebraska and Iowa, according to the Nebraska State Suicide Prevention Coalition and the Iowa Department of Public Health. The Nebraska legislature this session has had worthwhile discussion about young people's behavioral health needs regarding Legislative Bill 998 by State Senator Lynn Walz of Fremont. LB 998, as amended, would use privately donated funds to cover the cost of social workers who would specialize in behavioral health issues in schools. The American Academy of Pediatrics has put a spotlight on these concerns by recommending that doctors screen all kids ages 12 and up for depression annually. The World Herald's Julie Anderson reports only half of adolescents with depression are diagnosed before reaching adulthood, a study reported. It's encouraging that a wide variety of medical institutions in Nebraska and Iowa are already taking such steps. We're trying to focus on the entire child and their growth and development, Dr. Rachel McCann, a pediatrician with Children's Physicians Valverde office in La Vista, told Anderson. Dr. Kayla Pope, program director for psychiatry at Creighton University, said, "We're seeing good results for kids due to the stepped-up efforts. The tragedies of school shootings and teen suicides underscore the increased need for society to devote greater attention to addressing young people's mental health needs. The physicians, clinics, schools, and other organizations helping on this issue are doing tremendously important work." Paul?
In this letter to the editor, the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act is wrong for the country. The last thing we need to do is loosen gun laws. It is not right to force states to adhere to other states' laws in this way. What we do need are laws that end access to military-style weapons, such as the AR-15. We need to outlaw any device that can turn a gun into an automatic or rapid-fire gun. High-capacity clips also need to be outlawed so that it is a crime to use one or sell one in the U.S. We need universal nationwide background checks. The Second Amendment can and should be limited to these ways that will save lives. The more important right is to be able to attend school safely. No arming of teachers. Go to concerts and discos safely and attend church without fear of attack. To have life. Gun rights are secondary. The U.S. doesn't have more mentally ill citizens or violent movies or video games. All of the world's citizens can experience illness in media like we do. What we do have is a gun problem. Other countries have better laws that put valuing lives first. The National Rifle Association doesn't value lives, as it has demonstrated that over and over. Money and power over politicians are what matters to it. And that was signed by Susan Sorrenti of Lincoln. Rick?
In a column written by Sarah Howard, Paul Schumacher, and Anna Weishart, all members of the Nebraska legislature, don't use state budget to set new social policies. As Nebraska state senators, we will not make a choice between child welfare and women's health care funding because we know child welfare is inextricably linked to women's health care. A healthy mom is a healthy family. With that in mind, we have opposed efforts by our governor and some of our colleagues to make standalone women's health clinics ineligible for Title X federal grant funding for vital preventative health services. Contrary to the governor's claims that we are detrimentally affecting child welfare, we have all wholeheartedly fought to support complete funding for child welfare, as was evident in our diligent attempt to override the governor's veto of increased funding for child welfare in the 2017 budget. Language in the mainline budget bill L 944 would change the way providers qualify to receive Title X funding, putting healthcare centers in Grand Island, Kearney, Crete, Lincoln, North Platte, Fremont, and Omaha at risk of losing their Title X funding. Some have miscategorized this as a battle over abortion. However, Title IX federal funds are already prohibited from going toward abortion services per the Hyde Amendment in 1973. What is really at stake is access to services for low-income women, including cancer screenings, health services for sexual assault survivors, STD testing and treatment, HPV testing and vaccinations, and other important health and life-saving procedures. Lack of access to these critical health services has strong repercussions for children. Texas provides an example we should not seek to emulate. In 2011, Texas changed how it offers women's health services, moved to exclude Planned Parenthood from these family planning dollars, even though its participating clinics weren't performing abortions. This resulted in 100,000 fewer people being served the following year, according to numbers compiled by the Texas Tribune. According to the Centers for Disease Control, maternal mortality doubled in the state between 2010 and 2012. Low-income women and men rely on Title X services, and for some, it is their only option to access a medical professional. The policy decisions we make each and every day in the legislature impact real people, which is why we don't take our work lightly. The unicameral legislature is a unique body where the people serve as the second house. To set new social policies within our state budget rather than through the procedure established to hear bills going through the legislature's standing committees is an affront to our deliberative process and an overreach by the executive branch. It sets a bad precedent for future legislatures who would be debating the particulars of the budget to ensure priorities are met instead of using that time to debate divisive social issues. We are concerned anytime our state budget is used as a vehicle to establish new social policies. We're not alone in these concerns. Previous Attorney General opinions back up these concerns, including one from 1976 that states it is very questionable whether an appropriations bill may contain language which does not relate to the appropriate purpose of the act. There is a reason why our legislative predecessors have guarded the integrity of our budget legislation. We hope future legislators will do the same. As Nebraska state senators, making budget decisions are at the forefront of our responsibilities. We approach the budget process thoughtfully and carefully. We understand that our decisions have considerable impact on the 1.9 million Nebraskans in our great state. Protecting all Nebraskans is our goal. Paul?
This article is written by Representative Jeff Fortenberry. Recently, my good friend, former U.S. Representative in Nebraska, Governor Charlie Throne, passed away. Although my responsibilities in Washington prevented me from attending a celebration of his life back in Lincoln, I wanted to commemorate his life here so you could understand what he meant to me, to Nebraska, and to the perennial values we hold dear: chivalry, integrity, fairness, prudence, and respect toward those with whom you disagree. Just outside my Lincoln office hangs Charlie's picture, one of the 29 representatives who have served Nebraska's 1st congressional district since Nebraska's founding just after the Civil War. One of these persons, Turner M. Marquette, served 2 days. Another, the great orator William Jennings Bryan, ended up running for president. I didn't know these men of antiquity, but I knew Charlie. Charlie Throne exhibited the finest qualities of a Nebraska statesman: solid, honest, down-to-earth, practical too. He once told a member of my staff, every time the congressman stops in a small town, make sure he goes to the grain elevator. Charlie understood what farmers think because he was one himself. He grew up on a 400-acre farm north of Hartington, where his family raised corn, hogs, and cattle. It was formative. He ended up serving on the House Agriculture Committee and most notably on the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated the tragic death of President John F. Kennedy. Famed CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite dubbed Throne the conscience of the committee. Though conspiracy theories have long surrounded President Kennedy's death, Charlie had that hard-won Nebraska aversion to anything not grounded in fact. He concluded that Kennedy died not because of some vast conspiracy, but because of a paranoid guy that thought he would have his day in the sun. That's hard-nosed Nebraska realism at its finest. In the late 70s, Charlie returned home from Washington to run for governor, and he was elected. In 1982, he ran for and received re-election. At the time, his staff told him about a young man named Bob Kerrey, who was also aspiring to be governor. The staff was pretty dismissive, but Charlie pushed back and said, no, he's a serious candidate. Charlie had the insight to see that Bob had the skill set, youth, and background to be a viable candidate. Charlie said this without anxiety, without anger or resentment. Like the Nebraska statesman he was, Charlie took a calm, reasoned approach to these realities. It was just a matter of fact that Bob Kerrey represented a real rival, and we all know the history. Bob won. In contrast to the drama and trauma that seemed to accompany today's election losses, Charlie, after his defeat, was customarily sort of happy. This was the best thing that happened to Charlie Throne, he was purported to have said. It was vintage Charlie, who never failed to display humility, grace, and self-depreciating wit, whether in victory or defeat. In fact, when Charlie received any award, he would often say, quote, "This is a whole lot of gravy for a small amount of potatoes," end of quote. Though Charlie lived a long, fulfilling, and happy life, I am still saddened by his departure. Charlie Throne represented that timeless Nebraska belief in nobility of public service. But he was not just a great Nebraskan. He was a great man, and he was very generous to me. Well done, my friend. Thank you, and God bless you. Rick?
And here's an article from the Public Pulse. Lives are worth protecting. As an advocate for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault in a small community, I work with victims who are afraid to go to their local clinics because of fears that despite HIPAA rules, their doctors will reveal their stories. As a result, many survivors feel even more isolated. It is for this reason that I almost always refer clients to Planned Parenthood. Survivors of sexual violence know that they can go to Planned Parenthood for confidential, judgment-free care. Planned Parenthood can also provide undetectable birth control methods to women who have abusive partners trying to sabotage their birth control. My clients know that they can go to Planned Parenthood for little to no cost thanks to Title X funding, which our governor is fighting to take away, and in doing so, placing the entire program at risk. It is time to include sexual assault victims in the governor's definition of pro-life as lives worth protecting. It was written by Sidney Butler Lincoln. Paul?
Well, it's 11:20, so we're going to switch over to today's living and entertainment and start out with Ask the Doctor. Dear Doctor, I'm 88 and have small, brown, rough, and very itchy spots that develop on my back and other areas. If I can scratch them off, the itching goes away. One spot that I didn't scratch off is now embedded and I can't get it off. 2 dermatologists have basically said, it's your age. Live with it. Isn't there another answer? Dear reader, you seem to be describing, and I'm going to probably butcher the first part of it, seborrheic keratoses, the singular to keratosis. These scaly, thickened growths appear to be stuck on the skin, sort of like wall putty. Like wall putty, these lesions can often be scraped off. Unlike putty, however, they can come back on their own. Although most lesions are brown, they can also be white, black, yellow, or grayish. They normally appear after the age of 50. So yes, they are common in your age, but can begin in one's 30s. Keratoses can occur anywhere upon the body except the palms and soles, and the lesions are more likely to occur in some sun-exposed areas of the body. Some people have a few lesions. Others may have hundreds. I'll vote for that category. Such keratoses can be irritated by clothing, especially bras, leading to itching, pain, and bleeding. Although the sun may be a factor in the development of such lesions, their origin largely remains a mystery. We do know that when normal cell death is disrupted, skin cells accumulate, bunching up on top of each other. It's possible this disruption is caused by a genetic mutation in the skin cells. In fact, the likelihood of such lesions does seem to be influenced by genetics. Because the lesions resemble warts, many medical experts have postulated that the human papilloma virus, HPV, which creates warts, is the cause. A 2004 study took biopsies of keratoses from 55 people and compared them with 48 biopsies of normal skin in other individuals. Although the researchers found HPV in 76% of the keratoses, they couldn't conclude that HPV was the cause. Doctors are usually not worried about keratoses, as your experience attests, because the likelihood of them becoming cancerous is extremely small. But although the lesions are not harmful, they're not pretty either, which is the primary complaint against them. The basic treatment is to try to destroy them, especially if they're causing irritation. Biopsies are rarely necessary unless something about the lesion looks cancerous. Liquid nitrogen is often the first choice of doctors trying to destroy keratoses. It makes the lesions blister and then fall off, which may be a good option if it is overly itchy or painful, but the lesions can return. Doctors can also shave off the lesions, but this can lead to bleeding and scarring. Laser therapy can remove the lesions as well, but is rarely used. As for topical treatment, the Rhinatoid cream can diminish keratoses, as can a topical medication used for warts. In the future, when science has figured out the causes for keratoses, doctors will be more apt to prevent these lesions from occurring, perhaps through a vaccine. In the meantime, if these lesions are not physically irritating, there is no pressing need for treatment. So you may just have to live with it. Rick?
Been there, done that.
Yep, amen.
Molly Kavanaugh's mamaha.com column. Kids always find time to argue, except at bedtime. My kids have hit an age where they bicker all the time. The arguments aren't Civil War level. No one is taking up arms against their brother or sister. They're just those needing little spats that play like background noise in an otherwise peaceful house, little squabbles that crop up all throughout the day, every day, single day. It's that perfect alchemy of the know-it-all older brother and the nosy, shadowy little sister that drives 6-year-old Mara crazy, and her brother is older than she is. And my 8-year-old Declan is equally incensed that his younger sister is always following him. Lately, I've been spending a good portion of my days running interference between the two. I try to sidestep the obvious triggers. He got more cinnamon on his applesauce than me. She's using my smelly markers. By letting them know if they can't work it out, I am more than happy to remove, possibly permanently, the cause of their quarrel. This is received with grumbled acceptance. I'm not always that quick on my feet, though, and some bickering can't be solved with feigned banishment. Just the other day, we were discussing how Mara was going to have a friend over for a play date. Declan would still be at school, so it seemed like a trigger for exchange. Nope. He immediately launched into a catalog of items he did not want disturbed while he was absent. Don't touch my Legos, Mara, especially my AT walker. And don't sit on my bed or touch my bank. I don't want you getting into my stuff. Normally, 2 6-year-old girls left to their own devices aren't going to grab a boy's bank, his most beloved and fragile toy, and set up shop on his bed, but now they might. It was at this point I wanted to tell him he had basically just drawn up a surefire checklist for his sister things to do while he was away in order to annoy him. There's just no helping some people. This is just a snapshot, a small blip on the radar of the daily verbal sparring that goes on between these two. It's exhausting. It's also baffling because at the end of what sometimes feels like a never-ending day of quarreling, they march off to the room they share every night at 8 p.m., and like magic, their squabbling ends when the bedroom door closes. The room is like our house's own demilitarized zone. Instead of sharp outbursts and hissed insults, my husband and I hear loud playing and outright laughter. It's puzzling. Do they argue throughout the day for show? For Lent, Mara pledged to be nice to her brother. She came home from school with a laminated cross entombing her crayon-scribbled declaration. Plastic was barely dry, and the pledge still had a warm tackiness to it when I complimented her on her willingness to be kinder to her brother over the next 40 days. She threw up her hands and exasperatedly replied, "I don't know why I said that. I will never be able to do it. Never." Well, Mara, it would appear never is actually 8 p.m. every school night at our house. Nighty-night, Vickersons. Paul?
All right, let's switch over to Dear Amy. Dear readers, this week I am running topical best of columns while I'm on book tour meeting readers of my memoir, Strangers Tend to Tell Me Things, which is now out in paperback. I'll be back next week with more answers and advice directed toward a fresh batch of dilemmas. Today's topic is neighbors. Dear Amy, our next door neighbor is someone most people would think of as an ornery old man who is probably an alcoholic. He rarely acknowledges anyone, drinks and smokes while tinkering in his garage every day, and does things like keeping the kids' soccer balls when they land in his yard until a parent comes to retrieve it with the child. We ignore his alcohol breath and unpleasant personality and have a civil relationship with him. We have taught our children to be respectful no matter how much they dislike him, unlike some others in the neighborhood. He has been a good neighbor by informing us when our garage door is open late at night, our outdoor pipes are leaking or gushing water, etc. I have asked him for advice on what to do regarding an outdoor household problem, and he has voluntarily fixed it for us with supplies from his garage. He doesn't stop until it's done correctly in line with his high his high standards. We thank him profusely and have repaid him with bottles of good wine, which makes him very happy. Are we being enablers by repaying a likely alcoholic with wine? Signed, Enabler. Dear Enabler, sidestepping the issue of enabling, I'd like to point out that when we give your neighbor wine, you are providing him with the tools to make him less competent, healthy, and selfishly speaking, less useful to you. If you were really grateful, you could also throw in a carton of smokes, making him happy but decreasing his lifespan. There are many ways to thank this good neighbor that don't involve feeding his addiction. For instance, you could give him a gift card to his favorite hardware store. You could also offer to rake his leaves or shovel the lawn this winter. And that was in November of 2013. Rick?
In its final season, The Americans more relevant than ever before. On a drizzly night in February, Carrie Russell and Holly Taylor walked down a hilly block in Upper Manhattan that was doubling for Reagan-era Washington in a scene from FX's spy thriller, The Americans. Russell in character as Elizabeth Jennings, a KGB agent living undercover in the United States. In the waning days of the Cold War, was dispensing tough love to her daughter Paige, a college student sympathetic to the Soviet cause. You're going to have to make a decision to commit to this or get out, because sometimes this is what we have to do, said Russell as Elizabeth. Are you willing to give up friends and relationships, your life if you have to? The tension between the personal and the political is at the heart of The Americans, which returns for its final 10-episode season Wednesday and centers on Elizabeth and her husband Philip, played by Matthew Rhys, a pair of seemingly mild-mannered travel agents and suburban parents who carry out deadly covert missions on behalf of the motherland. The series is both a gripping story of espionage and a portrait of a uniquely complicated marriage. Initially arranged by their KGB handlers, the Jennings relationship is loving but also strained by their spy duties, which include extramarital affairs, the assumption of numerous false identities, and the occasional disposal of a dead body. Though never a huge ratings hit, the Emmy-nominated series is an engrossing slow burn that has had critics swooning since its premiere in 2013. And with newly hostile relationships between the U.S. and Russia stoking fears of a revived Cold War or worse, the period drama has also become increasingly relevant. Showrunners Joe Weisberg and Joel Fields have known for some time how the Jennings story will end, but that hasn't exactly made it easier for them to say goodbye. At the Brooklyn production offices a week before final wrap, moving boxes were pulled up in the lobby. Everybody's in a weird mood, admitted series creator Weisberg, a former CIA agent. We're so enmeshed in the world, everything feels real to us. When The Americans debuted in 2013, the Cold War seemed to be another quaint relic of the 1980s. But amid headlines about Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election and possible Kremlin collusion with the Trump campaign, the period drama is bowing out at a moment of unexpected topicality. Few people are more surprised by the show's timeliness than Fields, or especially Weisberg, who admitted to a lifelong fascination bordering on obsession with Soviet affairs and Russian politics. Though his 3 years in the CIA taught him that intelligence officers from one side were not that different from intelligence officers on the other side, inhabiting the world of The Americans for 6th season has pushed his sympathies even further. I really do see things very, very deeply from the Russian perspective. As The Americans winds down, there are lessons to be learned from the era it depicts, Weisberg said. We have once before turned Russians into such venal enemies that we fought a long, hard, very painful war with creating incredible collateral damage, he added, and we're doing it again. Paul?
All right, I almost missed this, but I realized I haven't said anything about food. So it's time to get that taken care of. With spring upon us, I offer a dish guaranteed to spruce up a seasonal brunch. It may look complicated, but it really couldn't be simpler. The only hump to get over is fear of pilo's thinness and delicacy. You'll likely find pilau dough in the frozen foods section of your supermarket. Before working with it, you should let it defrost overnight in the refrigerator, not on the counter. After taking the sack of pillow sheets out of the package, cover the top layer with a piece of plastic wrap, then cover the plastic wrap with a damp towel. You'll work with just one sheet of pillow at a time, keeping the rest under wraps. Brush both sides of each sheet with oil. Then you simply shape the dough into a nest by scrunching in the dough on the edges. When you're done, the floor of the nest should be about 3 inches in diameter, the edges about 1.5 inches high. So that was only the hard part of the recipe. And I am looking at a picture of this completed, and I think it is well worth it. And that dough looks really good.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Oh, boy. This picture almost looks like you could eat it.
Yes.
Okay, that's my food entry
Okay.
for this moment. I'll see if I can find something else.
How much in food here?
Oh, I'm sorry. to
See,
hear
at dinner
that.
you can fish out of the freezer. A simple salmon dish needs just a few ingredients for a quick weeknight meal. It seems like a mere moment before I get the last dish dried and put away. It's time to make dinner again. Is it me, or are the days actually getting shorter, whizzing by in a blur and then coming in at screeching halt at 6 p.m. when every person in my household starts wandering into the kitchen, casually asking what's for dinner, usually while opening up a cupboard to peruse available snacks. The solution is to have a small repertoire of dishes that require hardly any prep and that use ingredients you have on hand. And then, of course, keep these ingredients on hand. Stock your pantry with frozen wild salmon fillets and Dijon mustard, and you will never be more than a few sheet pan minutes away from a zesty, crusted salmon. While the ingredients might change up a bit depending on your mood and your pantry, the basic strategy is the same. Stir a few flavorful ingredients into some Dijon mustard. Spread on salmon and bake at 400 degrees Fahrenheit until done. About 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of the fish and whether it is thawed or frozen. Today's recipe for mustard and dill-crusted salmon is but one example of this recipe blueprint. Once you've mastered it, which it won't take long, you can venture out on your own a given Tuesday night and create your family's own version. I'll share a few of the best practices based on many years of mustard crusting salmon. Add a little something sweet like a touch of honey, pure maple syrup, or agave. Also include 1 or 2 aromatic ingredients like minced shallot, garlic, spices, or dried herbs. If you don't mind a little bit extra fat, a tiny bit of olive oil, or even mayonnaise will keep the dish juicy and tender for just a few extra calories a person. But don't fret if you want to skip the oil and put things over super lean. Finally, you can add a little texture if you want by topping with breadcrumbs or crushed nuts, but this is totally optional. I love salmon.
I do too.
Oh.
And on my recent trip, that salmon was
Was it?
unbelievable. Oh, yeah.
And I had salmon in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, no, they do, and boy, they can fix it really nice. Now, just to finish up our food aspects, and just tasty. Nearly 70% of all Americans who eat ham have served it at Easter. And that can mean only one thing. Nearly 70% of all Americans who eat ham have found themselves with leftover ham the next day. Leftover ham lends its distinctive flavor to any number of dishes. Combination of salt and smoke have enlivened untold acres of quiche, ocean of soup, and fields of beans. But what if you're tired of quiche, soup, and beans? What if one more plate of scalloped potatoes with ham will make you scream? The day after Easter can be referred to as Leftover Ham Day. This is the year to do something a little more fun with your ham. Do you like a ham sandwich? Make it better. Enjoy a quesadilla. Try one with ham. Fond of spicy, cheesy breakfast sandwiches? Ham it up. Let's start with that somewhat spicy, cheesy breakfast sandwich. If you kind of squint at it, it resembles a certain egg, cheese, and English muffin sandwich available at a very popular fast food restaurant. Let's call it an egg muffin. But a homemade ham and cheddar green chili breakfast sandwich is so much better than an egg muffin. The difference is the loving care with which you make it. The ingredients selected to best match your personal taste, the time and effort you put into crafting that perfect sandwich. And based upon that, we will move away from food.
Moving on to business and markets. Ex-pharmaceutical executive gets prison. As CEO of Omaha firm, he sent millions in kickbacks to reps of benefit plans. The former chief executive officer of an Omaha pharmaceutical benefits for management firm has been sentenced to a term in federal prison after pleading guilty to engaging in an illegal kickback scheme. Douglas M. Pick of Omaha, president and CEO of Pharmaceutical Technologies from 1992 to 2013, was sentenced to serve a year and a day and to pay a $50,000 fine and $348,000 in restitution. Investigators said Pick, 58, agreed to give more than $3.5 million in illegal kickback payments to representatives of pharmacy benefit plans in exchange for their business between 2001 and 2013. In one example, PTI gave more than $1.5 million in illegal payments to the chief executive of a Texas hospital subsidiary. The money added up from a fee imposed on the hospital business customers for each prescription they filled. PTI funneled the fees to a shell company set up by the Texas executive. In another case, a manager of a Minnesota pharmacy service business received about $750,000 in illegal payments for steering business to PTI. Omaha-based PTI entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the Justice Department and agreed to pay more than $8.5 million. The company agreed to cooperate with the Justice Department in the investigation and prosecution and to maintain internal controls and compliance with federal anti-fraud statutes. Paul?
Wells Fargo CEO Timothy Sloan said Tuesday that the bank is in talks with gun makers who are its clients, the latest financial institution to disclose steps it's taking after last month's deadly attack at a Florida high school. Wells Fargo, the number 3 U.S. bank by assets and the second largest bank in Nebraska, was the gun industry's top financer, Bloomberg News reported this month. Sloan did not say what Wells Fargo might do, and he declined to name the gun makers, citing client confidentiality. But he said the bank is providing those clients with feedback it is hearing from Wells Fargo employees, investors, and others. What we find is absolutely consistent whether you are a gun owner or not, Sloan said in an interview. You want your children to be safe. You should be safe when you go to school. They should be safe when they're walking down the street. That's consistent. How we go about that is more complicated. The bank helped 2 of the biggest U.S. firearms and ammunition firms get $431.1 million in loans and bonds since December 2012, a time when gun control issues reignited after the school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, Bloomberg reported. Wells has provided a credit line to the National Rifle Association, according to Bloomberg. New York-based Citigroup, the 4th largest U.S. bank by assets, announced last week a new policy for its retail clients, including a requirement that they not sell firearms to someone who hasn't passed a background check. In addition, they must not sell firearms to individuals under 21 or sell bump stock or high-capacity magazines. Bank of America, the number 2 U.S. bank, said in February that it's reaching out to clients that manufacture assault weapons for non-military use to understand what they can contribute to this shared responsibility. Sloan said Wells Fargo is continuing to encourage elected officials to look at the issue not from a partisan perspective, but in a way that they can really solve the problem. Rick?
Moving on to sports in Nebraska football, no secret that Morgan likes new direction from Lincoln. There's a long black curtain atop the Hawks Center. It sits behind Coach Scott Frost during his press conferences to cover a view of the practice field. Anyone in the building passing by wouldn't have been able to see Nebraska's second spring practice on Tuesday. Behind the curtain and a set of double doors, you can hardly hear the whistle and thumps of pads. The rebuilding of Nebraska football is happening in the shadows, and Stanley Morgan likes it all, especially the playbook. What's he like about it? Everything, he said with a smile. I can't tell you more. It's a secret. There's a newness spreading inside the Husker football program with hints of familiarity. Morgan returning following a record-setting 986 receiving yards in 2017 bridges the gap between last year's offense and Frost's new up-tempo scheme. Morgan reiterated on Tuesday that he didn't think too hard about forgetting his senior year for the NFL, but Frost returning to Nebraska did make the decision that much easier. I mean, you saw their offense last year, and you know they throw that thing up for everybody, so it's going to be a good fit, Morgan said. Following a week off for spring break, day 2 of spring camp wasn't as good as day 1, 11 days ago, Frost said, but with all the newness and morning practices, fast-paced reps, his guys seem to be leaning in. Usually when you're coming off a season like the one they had last year, guys are anxious for something new and a new way of doing things, Frost said. I think guys are excited about a new direction and a new way of doing things, and they bought in real fast. The off-season for Morgan back home in New Orleans was a reintroduction to the basics. Route running, pass catching during the off-season weight program. He packed down 6 pounds of muscle. The first workout, man, was crazy. I couldn't walk for a week, Morgan said. The off-season has also been a slow acceptance of being the old guy in the receiver's room. He's now the elder receiver telling guys it's okay to mess up a play, not to let it ruin their day. Frost said Tuesday that he thinks Tyjon Lindsey and J.D. Spielman could flourish in this offense. Coaches also seem impressed with JUCO transfer Mike Williams. In space, Frost said you can get them the ball and good things can happen. It's up to Morgan, who offensive coordinator Troy Walters has said many times could be a monster in this offense, to lead the young guys through this spring. After the first workout, we all bonded together. We were all just sitting there. We couldn't move, Morgan said. That's the main thing right now, just bonding and make sure you know everybody getting together and figuring it out. It's no secret that Morgan wants to head to the NFL after his senior year, which is why he's approaching things a little differently this spring. A lot will be thrown at the team in the coming weeks. Frost plans to unload most of the offense. That is why Morgan's mindset is different now from even a few months ago. Just preparing myself for the practice, Morgan said, preparing myself like a pro and preparing myself like a leader. I got to come ready every day. I got to come lead the guys. I can't take any days off. Well,
Asked directly if Tim Miles would be coaching the Nebraska men's basketball team next season, Nebraska Director of Athletics, Bill Moose, provided a direct answer. Oh, yeah. Moose said matter-of-factly, Tuesday afternoon, Tim is my coach. Moose went on to say that he would like to have an extension for Miles wrapped up in the week after the Final Four, which begins Saturday with the national semifinals and concludes Monday with the national title game. Moose wasn't ready to discuss details of any extension Miles would receive. I want to review it, Moose said. I've reviewed it, Miles' contract, to some degree with John Gentes, Nebraska Chief Financial Officer, but I really want to get into it in more detail just to see what we're working with now before I make any adjustments. Miles has 2 years remaining on a contract that is set to expire in March 2020. He did not receive contract extensions after the 15-16 and 16-17 seasons. What does Moose look for when putting together an extension for a coach? The stability of the program is really important. The last time that Tim had a real good year, we didn't follow it up with another one, Moose said. It's tougher to stay there than it is to get there many times, and I'm fully aware of that. So I'm really interested in what Miles thinks about the stability of the program and what I can do to help him in that regard. No matter how you slice it, Moose continued, finishing with 22 wins and going 13-5 in the Big Ten was a good accomplishment. We got to build on this, Moose said. That's some solid steps in the right direction. The first step for Moose this offseason was to get to know his basketball coach. Between firing one football coach and hiring another and restructuring the management of the athletic department, Moose simply didn't have much time to become familiar with Miles. Miles, by the way, was in the midst of leading the Huskers to one of the best seasons, at least by record, in program history. After a preliminary meeting in which the two essentially got to know each other, the two met again Friday so Miles could give Moose his assessment of the season. It's a meeting Moose has with all his coaches, he said, to get a better view of where things stand. Next, Moose said, is a meeting after the Final Four to talk a little bit more about the future. That includes learning about Miles' recruiting philosophy. Just like anything, and especially basketball, you get a couple of really good players and you can make some noise, Moose said. I think just from observing and not having been here a long time, that's what has happened here. So what's going to be our philosophy in regard to pursuing more transfers or building it around true freshmen or a combination of both? I need to have that conversation. Miles, despite Nebraska's disappointing finish, did a quality job, according to Moose. My assessment was that we got better as the season went on, Moose said. We had some newcomers on the roster, and I thought we had some very good players, and I thought we did some really good on the floor coaching. Still, losing to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, then receiving a 5 seed in the NIT, and losing to Mississippi State to end the season left a sour taste in everyone's mouth. I learned a long time ago, you do what you can and control what you can and go with the flow with the things you can't control. Excuse me. Moose said, I thought we positioned ourselves well, but the double hit was not getting a higher seed in the NIT and a home game. I think I was probably more disappointed of the seed in the NIT than I was in not making the NCAAs. Rick?
In the Creighton, Nebraska baseball game, Church shuts down NU after finding his fastball. Creighton graduate transfer Preston Church could tell in warm-ups he had his fastball working finally. The pitch that had frustrated the veteran left-hander in his first 6 appearances with his new team served as the cornerstone in his midweek masterpiece at TD Ameritrade Park. Church tossed 6 2/3 scoreless innings and subdued a reeling Nebraska offense in the 3-1 CU victory before 3,000 people. It was the longest outing for a Blue Jay pitcher against the Huskers since 2002, and certainly the best performance of the year for Church, who had walked 13 batters in 10.5 innings entering Tuesday. Previously, I haven't really had a good fastball command, and that's pretty much what I based my pitching off of, Church said. Just making sure I can spot up my fastball. Tuesday I had it. Everything just worked off that. Church didn't face a 3-ball count until the 6th inning. He threw 71% of his pitches for strikes, regularly finding himself with a strategic advantage. He didn't walk anyone. The Huskers, 13-12, couldn't break his rhythm. Finding a way to make opposing pitchers uncomfortable, even when they're relentlessly attacking the zone, has been an issue lately, according to Coach Darren Erstad. NU's lost 3 of its past 4 games, and it has scored just 2 total runs in those defeats. Erstad said some Huskers may be thinking too much about getting themselves out of this funk, trying too hard, he said. Some are simply slumping. Nebraska missed out on its best chances at the plate Tuesday, and you began the game with back-to-back singles in the first inning, but the next three hitters all popped up. Senior Scott Schreiber was responsible for the first out in the fourth when he got tagged heading into third base when attempting to advance from first on junior Jess Wilkening's blooper to left. The Huskers were 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position until sophomore Luke Grosskam's two-out single in the ninth scored Schreiber. That snapped a 20-inning scoring drought. We're having a really hard time hitting the ball now, Erstad said. Creighton, on the other hand, got the hits it needed Tuesday. The Jays, 13-6, who have won 8 of their last 10, took a 1-0 lead on sophomore Will Robertson's two-out double down the right field line in the first inning. They added 2 key insurance runs in the bottom of the 8th, and when junior Thomas Lovano knocked a bases-loaded single into left field. Those were important moments, Ed Cervais said. But in his mind, the story was what occurred in the other half innings when Church was dealing and CU's error-free fielders were backing him up. Tuesday was about as close to a perfect game from Creighton defensively and pitching as you can have, Cervais said. That doesn't happen without Church, who began the year in the weekend rotation before disastrous starts in his first 2 games. He didn't make it out of the second inning in one. He didn't record an out in the other. But he knew he had more to show for his team. He hopes Tuesday's 4-hit, 3-strikeout performance is just a start. This is only the first one, Church said. I've still got a lot of work to do. Well,
This article out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. John Beeline has been a college basketball coach for 4 decades. So by this point, his peers have a good idea of what to expect. His strategy may change and evolve. This year, Beeline's Michigan team is noticeably better on defense, but the values and culture of his program remain consistent. When you're a head coach all those years, you watch every program he builds, Villanova coach Jay Wright said, and are just impressed with the same character, class, dignity at each school. After a season clouded by an FBI probe, when college basketball's problems seem to be approaching a tipping point, get ready for a feel-good Final Four of sorts, especially in Saturday night's first semi-final when the captivating underdogs from Loyola Chicago take on Michigan and Beeline, a man so respected by his fellow coaches that he topped a preseason poll on the topic of following the rules. That vote, conducted by CBS Sports, gave Beeline some good publicity before the season. CBS asked more than 100 coaches which high major coach they believe does everything by the book and operates completely within the NCAA's rulebook. Beeline finished first in the poll, and when asked in early October about being such a clean coach, he joked that he does it by showering regularly. On Monday, after leading Michigan to its second Final Four in 6 seasons, he remained humbled about his good guy reputation. I think I represent hundreds of Division I coaches that are doing things the right way, the 65-year-old Beeline said. That was not an exact poll. That was a very random poll, but we do everything we can to make sure we follow the very spirit, not just of the NCAA rules, the spirit of the rules of the NCAA. Beeline coached at Canisius in Richmond before reaching the big time with West Virginia and Michigan. His gradual rise stands out in a sport where quick climbs and quick falls are fairly common. He's also been a head coach his whole career, meaning his teams reflect directly on him. When someone is a head coach, you kind of know who they are and you watch what they do, said Wright, who recalls when he was an assistant at Rochester and Beeline was the head coach at Lemoyne. You watch them at Lemoyne, Kansas, Richmond, West Virginia, Michigan. I hope I didn't forget one of them, added Wright, whose Villanova team faces Kansas in Saturday's other semifinal. But that's where I started watching him, And you saw the same consistency, quality of character, quality of players he recruits. Class of his team on the court and off the court. Well, it's 11:59 and it's time for us to depart from here. So I'll go get Snowball and take him out for a little washing. And hopefully he doesn't get too fluffed up and people think he's a bigger snowball than he really is. So this has been Paul Murphy reading articles from the Lincoln Journal-Star.
This is Rick Miner, and I've been reading from the Omaha World-Herald. Have a good week.
Thank you very much, Paul Murphy and Rick.
Did you see that Kansas Duke game the other day?
I saw the end. Well, no, I didn't see the end. I listened to it. My son, who teaches at KU, was coming back from Mississippi. He had been a guest instructor at Southern Michigan or Mississippi, and couldn't get stationed. So I was going over to visit a friend at Methodist Hospital, and I was listening to it. And so I called Scott and I said, how's everything going? He says, well, I can't get the game. I said, I'm listening to it. So I held up the phone so he could listen to it. Yeah, that was an amazing game. Oh.
7 days a week.
Two classy programs. Yeah, that could have been a final in the NCAA.
Yeah, it should have been. Been different category.
Yep. Oh, definitely.
That's what happens.
Well, I was just like
Those two teams have been 30 or 40 years.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's just like the semifinal match between Penn State and Nebraska in volleyball this last year.
Oh, yeah.
That should have been an NCAA final. I mean, that had everything, just like this basketball game. I mean, that basketball game.
That was something. Yeah, 19 lead changes in the fourth quarter. Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Back and forth,
Yeah.
back and forth. Thank you. All right, I will see you tomorrow.
Very good.
I won't.
Wait, I need your photo.
Oh, yeah,
I need your photo.
Yeah,
I haven't got your photo yet.
She's putting numbers underneath the
Tell me I'm in the witness protection.
picture.
It's okay, we'll keep it in-house.
Okay.
You're gonna, yeah.
All right, have a great day.
Yep.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay,
All right.
get my position here. Okay. Now I'm gonna take two, just in case. Takes a minute to. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
You got it.
All right.
I
How's
don't know.
How's your arm?
Well, I'm going to see the surgeon tomorrow. Well, I don't know what's.
Is that the first? No, but you've been to someone else and they
I did a MRI.
you actually have something.
Something's broken loose in there. But on I felt the muscles. Everything's healing now. Oh, I'll see what it makes. I'm thinking that may be. But whatever this thing is floating around there, I don't know.
You've actually like broken something off and it's like,
It doesn't bother me too much, but every once in a while I can feel it.
ouch.
We'll see it. So anyway, I'll probably be here next Wednesday, but I'll call you. I'm not going to be. I'll call you. I'll probably call you tomorrow.
We could send a microphone over to the hospital.
There you go.
We're flexible.
Okay.
Okay, take it easy.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you do. Oh, have a nice Easter.
Thank you.
I think that either way, I'll just wait till Friday. I'll make sure to vote. Right, right, but I can.
This is my favorite program on our station.
What is it?
I listen to Matthew do the supermarket ads.
You make
I love it. No, I just love listening to it. He just is like, it's just so
He does a really good job.
amazing. I listen to him every Wednesday.
But you could give us all the summary on where to go shopping.
Well, yeah, honestly, Aldi's has cheesecakes on sale. We should get some cheesecakes for, what you call it?
Mini ones or something?
I think both sizes. It includes plain and chocolate sprinkles.
There's a new Aldi's on
Yes.
72nd,
Yes, I know.
which I ride up with my route. I'm not stopping it. I know, I've never shopped it at Aldi's.
Oh, that's a beautiful store. I was in there the other day. I know it's the first time I've been in there. They opened in December. That's the first time I've been in there. That's a beautiful store. They just redid the store over in House of Bluffs too. And it's gorgeous. And so I said to the woman at the counter, I said, I'm a sort of shop. I live on 30th Street and it's not nearly this nice. And she said, we're coming there next. They're coming there next.
Well, I think there's one in Bellevue.
Probably.
Yeah, and that's,
There's a big push. There's another German chain that is entering the market. So Aldi's is up in the grid, up in the
that's the ante.
yeah.
Good. Yeah, I know a lot of people that I interact with live in Bellevue, and they talk about that store. It's,
on my way, so I don't go there, but I might just stop at that one. Now, if we got, was it a large cheesecake that we have to slice?
I think they probably cut. You know how they do with the,
Yeah.
well, I don't know for sure. Let me call it.
Call Matthew.
Yeah. I'm asking, you remember those cheesecakes?
Bet he forgot.
Yeah.
Probably go, la, 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 la.
Unfortunately, I can tell you know, I picked up the oats that had already been read and just copied them and cut and paste. And I literally recognized the names of the people who were read the day before. I mean, that's how bad it is.
I know, I'm not surprised. I heard the guy on Monday say he was moving to window because there was only one open.
Yeah. That was very, I feel so sorry for him. He has no business, no, and one obituary. So I put a bunch of stuff.
You did, so
Yeah,
that's
but
good.
I just. Now, what's the third, Murphy say? He was going to say, she learned how to dress a goose. And he said, it was part of part of the thing is it, and she had learned how to dress a goose. But what he said is, she had learned how to dress a moose.
Laugh.
Yeah, he said, no wait. No wait. That was it.
It'd be a ladder, I doubt it wouldn't stand still.
Hard saw.
Oh, man,
Dress
funny.
a dress a moose. Jane, you got, you. Just FYI. Hi, how are you? This is my photo wall, so I have to take this down every time I take someone's photo.
Oh, yeah.
So did you bring in something or did you find something?
Well-
We're so,
Got Nebraska magazine.
didn't we have that one? Oh, this is,
It's
That's-
Nebraska sport.
yeah, that's good. That's good.
Do
Yes.
you have a copy of this magazine?
I do.
Somebody's read that.
I actually ordered that subscription specific for here. And look, yes, do look at it because a lot of these things just. So just, yeah, you can. I do not know what's in here. I have not. I know that a lot
I
of
actually
it
read
is.
a couple of them already.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Do you want to carry this with you? Just leave that, the backup?
Sure.
Okay. Wait, we're trying to get.
That's okay, the show is sort of.
Yeah.
I noticed you changed that
Yes,
to an hour.
yes. It takes a lot. It takes a lot. Trust me. Somebody came in and read in that category the other day and we pieced and patched and I think she said in the end she used 10 or 11 articles to get an hour.
Yeah.
Because we had, well, you had the sports thing there, but I was trying to patch stuff together. And it took a lot.
Yeah.
Her organizational time just to get to the point where she could start reading was almost as long as the read, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to piecemeal things together. But you're like, you got your sports thing, so.
Well, we'll see what we can do.
All right.
Where's that voice though? Somebody in here when I walked in. Yeah, I couldn't think so.
But it's not, there's only. Yes, yes. Right.
So it's not your email.
Set timer for 30 minutes.
took that.